Hello, and welcome to the Zatsudive. I'm Yuki,
And I'm Noah.
and this is a podcast about VTubers, and also anime and gaming through the lens of VTubing.
So, Yuki, what is a VTuber?
Ooh, that's a great question. So for some people, a VTuber is a person who uses a live 2D or a 3D model on streams or in short form content in order to act as a persona for them to interact with the audience. But I think there's a little bit more to it there, because you also have things like PNG tubers. You have people who do VTubing and also live flush tubing, I think people call it, which I think is really fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What is a VTuber to you?
What is a VTuber to me? VTuber has become super mainstream now, right? So like the term now is like pretty broad. And I don't think you can like justify like what is a VTuber properly nowadays.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because there's, like you said, there's so much that can be considered as a VTuber.
Yeah, like
So I don't really know.
I mean, like for instance, to go to that point, there's like Lily Pichu is someone who I think most people outside of this have, like a lot of people outside of the VTubing, community or fandom or whatever you want to call it, are familiar with. But I don't think most of them think of her as a VTuber. But recently, she just put out like a song cover or an original song, I believe, that is very much in the VTuber space, where a lot of people who worked on it are, VTuber community artists. She has a model that she streams with occasionally, at least as far as I understand. So I agree. I think the lines are kind of getting blurred compared to, if you go back to like 2016
if you go back
or
to
whatever.
the good old days.
Yeah, like Kizuna Ai era, where it was like, oh, this is the VTuber. There's one of them. So it's a tough question. Yeah.
I think the main form of content also changed throughout the times, right? They used to do like short videos as to like the main source of content for VTubers nowadays are streams.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really good point, because back when Ai-chan was, top dog, there was I wasn't around back then either, but there was a big discussion at some point, in like forums, on Twitter, all those places that you should absolutely never go to. But people were like, okay, these new people coming out who are using 3D models and they're using this new emergent live 2D technology, but they're not making short form content. They're streaming. They're not really VTubers. They're V-streamers. And that was like a whole thing where people were like, no, if you don't make pre-recorded short form content, you're not a VTuber. And now it's kind of the opposite. Most VTubers nowadays are streamers first, and then they take their stream content and they turn that into clips on, TikTok or Instagram or YouTube Shorts or whatever.
Yeah, I think the same thing's happening right now. Like, you know how like a lot of VTubers like to like tweet and don't like actually post content, so that they're like V-tweeters instead of VTubers or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard that before too.
Yeah, I mean, I think time will tell. Times are always changing, I think. So, I think what is a VTuber is a very it'll get harder as time goes. Like maybe something super broad in the future, even broader than now, I think.
Yeah, I can't imagine it going back to the way it was before. Like the cat's kind of out of the bag, right? So
yeah,
it'll be tough for it to shrink further or like narrow down the definition. I think you're probably on the money with that. One thing that I find interesting is like the V-tweeter phenomenon. It's very interesting to me that there are, I don't know if people go into it with that mindset, but there are people who will go through the trouble of, commissioning a character design and getting a model and getting it rigged and, getting assets for their stream and everything. And then they never hit the go live button. And all they do is Twitter content. And like on the one hand, there are a lot of people who do that, who do short form content, but also there are a lot of people who just don't. They just tweet and get art commissioned. And it's like at some point you're no longer a VTuber, right? But where's the line, I guess is the question.
Yeah, there's a lot of gray area that, you know, needs to be like, how do you call it? Needs to be, you know, you need to find a line to draw, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, I don't know. A VTuber is whatever, you know, you feel is right in your heart. Ultimately. Like, there's no like CEO of VTubing, although maybe there should be. So maybe. Like, it's not the case that it really matters. I know that some people are voluntarily rejecting the VTuber label because there is a little bit of extra baggage there. A lot of people, I don't know, they got into VTubing through like the HoloLive EN boom, and either as fans or as VTubers themselves. And so I think a lot of the trappings of HoloLive have kind of bled into the wider ecosystem of what a VTuber is. People think that you need things like a debut. You have to do some sort of, you know, music or art in order to be a VTuber. So
especially for the EN community, right? They are very, very influenced by HoloLive EN, which I think is kind of a good thing. I think
there could definitely it could be worse for sure. Yeah.
But I think they set a good example though to be like a quality VTuber if you want to be like those like fancy company ones.
Yeah, right. That's true. So when you say like a good VTuber, I guess that's kind of
there's a
loaded question, but
yeah, that is a loaded question.
So I mean, ultimately, being good as a VTuber is kind of determined by the VTuber themselves, right? Like how happy you are with the content you're producing to the audience that you're producing it to, at the rate that you're producing it at.
Also the quality, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are really obsessed with quality.
Including us, I think.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. We're very, very... Here at the Zatsudive, we're very quality focused. But the jokes aside, I think a lot of people get really obsessed with having lots of bells and whistles. When they debut, they want, you know, like a fucking 4-minute anime MV animated by Studio Trigger themselves, and they need a debut with like 4 new original songs, and your model has to be, you know, 8 billion toggles and everything. And it's tough because on the one hand, having all of that does help with discoverability when you're starting out. If you make a big splash, people are likely to take notice, but I don't think it's like a requirement to be a VTuber to have all that stuff. So like to circle back to the HoloLive point, like when the big corporate VTubers are debuting and they have all of that, it definitely makes it feel like that's what a VTuber is. Is it someone who does what they do, even if you're on, you know, an independent creator's budget or like a lack of a budget entirely. So tough.
Yeah, they make the barrier to entry look very high.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things about VTubing is that the barrier to entry is like actually not there at all, right? You can kind of do whatever with whatever you have available, and people will be like, yeah, you're a VTuber, sure, if you call yourself one, I guess.
I mean, there's at this like point in time, there's a lot of free assets you could use. So that's technically, you only need like a PC to stream and like a mic that you can talk into, and then you should be fine, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I mean, on one hand, I believe that's true. Like, I really want to believe that it's true, but it's so hard, man. When you see people coming out swinging with everything.
Yeah.
It's
I can't
definitely
imagine that's like demoralizing.
to an extent for sure. It's also really tough because part of like I think one of the great things about VTubing is like anonymity, the separation between, I don't know, the puppeteer behind the character and the character itself is really cool. But because of that, it's like when you're playing an online game, right? You're playing a game of, I don't know, League of Legends because you're a degenerate and you have no life. And your teammates, they do something wrong, and it's really easy to get mad at them because they're just a username. They're just like there's not a real person there. I think the same thing is kind of true of VTubing, where like you see the model, you see the VTuber, but you don't see like the VTuber, if that makes sense. And it can be
Yeah.
really hard, I don't know, especially since a lot of VTuber fans they kind of skew younger, you know, people in high school or even younger, and they see their VTuber, like their favorite VTuber, like, I want to be just like them, and become a VTuber and not realize that, oh yeah, that's a working adult, or oh, that's a person with, you know, a corporation backing them, and the things that they can do are not essential to being a VTuber, but they can do it because they have that extra backing. And
Yeah.
I think it's very important
Sure.
to separate that out and be like, yeah, you don't need that to be a VTuber.
I agree. Definitely agree. But a lot of people also underestimate how hard it is to be a VTuber. I think like the constant like content output. I think it's for content creators in general, it's pretty hard to, you know, be consistent.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I was saying, right? Like a lot of people are working like a full-time job in addition to being a VTuber. And turns out being a content creator is basically just a second job between...
Unless you're super successful, right?
I guess.
Unless you're that 1%.
That's true. I mean, at that point, that's because you basically turned it into your primary job, so you no longer have to work too. But I mean, more along the lines of there's so much stuff that goes on for a VTuber or even a regular flush tuber beyond just like the hours that they're on camera. I know people have talked about how they have to be tethered to like social media. I think I want to say Ludwig might have had a discussion where he talked about this, where like he has to constantly be plugged in because if anything happens, he has to make a statement because he needs the engagement, or he has to like be ready to make a reaction piece because that's like his livelihood. If he doesn't make that content when the opportunity arises, that's just lost money. So there's a lot of even when you're on, you know, you're off streaming and you're in your free time, like you're still kind of, your mind space is there. And then also things like, video editing and recording, and if you make your own assets or your own music or whatever, then there's that. If you're your own editor, there's that. So there's a lot. And of course, it's not necessary to be a VTuber, right? Because you can just be the type of person who, you know, loads up twitch.tv or youtube.com, hits the go live button, streams for a couple hours, and then puts it away and doesn't do anything else. But I think a lot of people want a little bit more. They want, you know, either to chase some sort of growth metric or to connect to a community or something. And then that's obviously that's more time investment. So.
Oh yeah, 100%.
One thing that I think is interesting with like the question of what is a VTuber, and I'd like to get your thought on this, is like the community building aspect of it. It feels like every VTuber is trying to build like their own community. I don't know, is that in your mind like part of being a VTuber is having that, or do you think that's kind of just optional but a good way to, you know, drive engagement and whatever?
I think building a community just comes like in the same package as like being a VTuber. If you are like a VTuber that constantly posts like content, you will like build a community naturally. I think.
I think you might be right.
You always have like community like backing you. Even if you're like small, you will have like a tiny community. So like I think there are like definitely VTubers that focus on their community more than others. I think it just depends on what the VTuber wants. Like if you want to nurture if you want to focus your community or just focus on your own content, just depends.
I see. I think that makes sense. In terms of like nurturing a community, it does feel like that does kind of happen automatically, like you said. Because you're right. As soon as there's 2 people in chat or 2 people on Twitter who like post underneath something that the VTuber posts, now they can have a conversation about it. And then boom, boom, bada bing, bada boom, you got a community. Got yourself a stew.
Yeah.
So
easy clap.
Yeah. It might be like a chicken and egg thing where it's like, yes, community will happen. Yeah. Okay. So I think we've covered, at least on a surface level, what is a VTuber. At the very least, we have maybe the beginnings of a definition. What do you think about so we kind of touched on this a little bit about, the assets part and making sure you have all the bells and whistles. A couple, maybe like a week ago, as of the time of recording, maybe a week and a half, I saw some Twitter discussion, and this is a cycle that keeps happening over and over where this topic gets brought up. But a lot of people were talking kind of into the void about people complaining about model costs. So I guess what's your take on that? Do you think VTubers are paying too much for stuff? Do you think there's enough variety in what you can buy or not buy? Or create yourself? What do you think about the cost of VTubing?
I mean, like generally, the cost is pretty high. If you want to like, let's say a good model and good rigging, you'll probably be empty out of the pocket. But there is one thing though. You can cut a lot of cost depending on what you want. And of course, you don't always need a super good model and super smooth movement of the rigging. So I think it's really up to you on how much you want to, make it cost. Because like you can definitely make it work with like a simple rig and a very, very simple model. And you still pump up good content. So I think it really is up to the person, commissioning all the work. Or you could also do it yourself, which saves a lot of costing as well.
That's true. I do think it's one of those topics where a lot of people are kind of talking past each other, if that makes sense. I think there's 2 pieces to it. We kind of touched on it, right? There's the perception of how high the quality can be and how much things can be polished, like to the highest level. And of course you want that, right? No one wants to settle for not subpar, but like for less. No one wants to settle for less. So you have that on the one hand. And then on the other hand, you have, things are just more expensive now than they were. They just are. If you go back like end of 2020, right around the time when I was looking into this whole shindig, basically the cost of everything at that point was maybe a third or less of what it is now. So to contextualize that, maybe not everyone, a lot of people have probably heard of Iron Vertex, right? They are kind of best in class when it comes to rigging of models. And back then, if you looked at the cost of like the finished rigs that were coming out of Iron Vertex, it was somewhere in the ballpark of like $3,000 to $5,000, which was still a lot. Those numbers are kind of imaginary because the only people who know how much they paid are obviously the VTubers themselves, or I guess the corporations that bought those models. But that seemed to be like what people were saying. Like, okay, if you want the highest possible quality budget, 5,000, maybe a little bit more. If you look now, I believe C9 Vienna. Have you heard of her? She's like a dragon V2. Yeah, okay. So Vienna, she had a new model a little while ago, and she was talking about how like just the model itself was 10,000. And that's going off of like an existing model that she already has the model base, right? So they're not redrawing, or I believe they're not redrawing and recutting everything from scratch. They might have been, but either way, like that's a pretty big jump up in terms of just the art being that much. So it is definitely the case that costs have gone up. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think one, demand for the top end creators, right? For the Iron Vertex, of rigging and like, people like, name an artist who is super popular, like any of them.
Yeah.
Their demand is like, demand for their work is so high. And so obviously, basic economics, supply and demand, they can only make so many models, and so the price is going to go up as they're getting paid what they're worth. There's so much demand for it, obviously they can afford to charge more. People will continue to buy it, so it seems fair.
Yeah.
So
personally, I think the pricing is like super inflated though still.
I mean,
it's as an artist, like I see the prices sometimes, I'm like, oh, holy. Like it's super inflated, but it's justifiable. Just like you said, the demand is so high nowadays.
Part of the price, I think, is also like a name recognition thing too. Like when you buy a model from an artist who is well established, you're kind of getting a pre-built boost because of that. It's not insane. It's not like that. Like that artist is under no obligation to retweet every tweet that you ever post and link to all your streams or whatever. So you're not getting like a marketing team or anything. But just having that artist like occasionally post about, oh yeah, I made this model or something like that is pretty valuable. And it's unfortunate, but having like a model from like one of the well-known community people does give you an in terms of like, oh, other creators will be like, okay, yeah, I know that person who made this model. Maybe if this, new VTuber reaches out to me for something, I'll be more likely to say yes if they ask for a collab, for instance, or whatever. It's, again, I don't know how often that necessarily happens, but you are getting a lot out of the gate if you're getting art from someone who is established. Like their brand will benefit you. So I think that's one aspect of the cost that sometimes gets glossed over beyond just this person is, super well known and everyone wants their art. It's also that part of being super well known means that any projects that you work on, and that's what a VTuber really is like a collaborative project, those projects are going to get a boost because of it. So is it justifiable, the cost of every single new model that gets made? Maybe not, but that's definitely something to consider.
From just what you said, like the famous artist, like a well-known artist, and then they will like retweet it and like give you exposure. I think that is like a bonus as to like added to the costing. I don't think it should be added to the costing because I think it's like a two-way connection. It's like a natural two-way connection where if one side like blows up, the other side will naturally also rise a bit.
That's a good point.
So I think, I think like if you get like a very well-known artist, it's more of getting guaranteed quality instead of like a less well-known but also great quality. Great quality. Sure, you can get like super nice models from like unknown artists, but you run a very big risk of getting something that you don't want and something that is not up to your expectations. Yeah, I think that's where people would consider like bigger artists in the community because you know what they can do. They have like a guaranteed quality mark on them.
That's a
And
really good
also
point,
what you
yeah.
said, right? There's a very nice bonus you can have for like a big artist. Like, oh, look at my daughter or like my son. Then they post about you. Free clout, basically.
Free clout for sure. In addition to that, too, the not just like the guarantee of quality, but like also artists who are prolific and therefore probably have high demand. You also know that you're gonna get something turned around eventually. You're gonna get a piece of like there's no risk of, oh gosh, I hope this random doesn't just take my money and dip into the sunset.
Oh yeah.
So
true.
That's also
some people will just take your money.
I mean, it's also the flip side of that is also a common, or I don't know about common, but it's also like a scary thing that happens, right? Where the artist gets scammed as well. So as an artist, it's obviously, a completely different set of worms, and I can't claim to have been in that type of person's shoes. But definitely as a commissioner, going to someone who does have a history of, quality works that they deliver on time, their prices are probably higher as a result of it. But at least you know that, yeah, you're, like you said, you're getting that guarantee of quality. You're going to get something that will come to you in a timely fashion as well, which is important, right? Because there's a pretty big time delay on VTubing stuff, like between when you first reach out to when your commission first gets accepted for, I don't know, a design even, because some people will go to one person for design and another person for model. So between that initial like design getting accepted and having a finished product that you can load up into your favorite live 2D software or whatever, there's a pretty big delay. And so cutting that down is nice. It lets you get some return on investment sooner as well. So I think all of that kind of ties into some of the unseen reasons why prices are higher for those community, like the really well-known artists.
Also, mainly just the fact that, making a model is like super, super hard and takes a lot of time. Like you said, it's a lot of workload to make a model and to rig it especially.
Gosh, yeah. I don't know if you've ever watched anyone do rigging. It is long and tedious.
I dabbled into rigging oh my lord, it was so hard to like actually just to get the mouth to move. Yeah, it's very time consuming and you need a lot of knowledge to like make a good rig. I think the price is somewhat justifiable even though it's inflated.
Yeah, that's another thing. You're paying for the knowledge and the experience, like all of the learning that person did up until the point of taking your commission on, taking your money to make something for you. You're kind of reaping that hard work. It's not just the work that they're doing on your model, which is really hard too, but also like all the work that they had to do beforehand to get to the point where now they feel like they can charge what they're charging.
Personally, as an artist, it's very painful when someone says like, "Oh, your price is too high. Can you lower it for me or like a discount?" It's so painful because like you don't want to downplay like your quality because you know yourself, right? So at the same time, you also kind of feel bad because models are expensive. And you kind of know that in the back of your mind. So like it's like a very hard position for the artists themselves to be, So don't be that kind of jackass who wants a discount.
Yeah.
Pay for what they offer.
Definitely. I think that's where a lot of the discussion comes is, an artist will receive like a shitty DM where someone's like, your artwork sucks and you're charging way too much, blah, 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 blah. And
I can find someone better with cheaper pricing.
Yeah. All right, sure. Go do it. You don't need to tell me.
Do it then.
But yeah, I think don't do that for sure. So that's the top end though, right? Is all this prices that are, skyrocketing because, everyone wants a Brian Sui rig or I don't know who's an artist. Fuck. Dude, I'm such a
Oh,
poser.
yeah,
Holy
because,
shit. I'm such a poser. My lord.
I mean, there's a lot of good artists.
Give me a half second. Hayama Fair. Yeah. Like who
Yeah.
does Bow in Vienna? Like they want Hayama Fair to draw their model. Like everyone wants that. But realistically, obviously, those people can only take a limited number of commissions. So even if you could pay for that, there's just a limited amount of work that they can take on. So you kind of touched on it earlier. There is a lot of high quality incomers in the space, which I think is really exciting. I think that is one of the things that can help alleviate price if that's a concern for people who are looking to get into VTubing or they've started, that process. There are lots and lots of people out there who do make high quality stuff. It's just kind of, that's the gamble you're taking, I guess. They're going to be charging less because their portfolio is smaller, and there's just a chance that it might not work out exactly the way you want it to work out.
Exactly.
So I guess, do you have any, I don't really have any experience there in terms of how to navigate that. Do you have any thoughts or?
Any thoughts on how to find like small artists?
Yeah.
It's pretty hard, I think, if you're not in like the rig space of artists. It's very hard to find like small artists that would take like a model job. And it's also super hard to find like, even if you find like a small artist that is open, somebody else probably found them first. That's because everyone wants to be a VTuber, like you said. So as to like giving tips, I think honestly you should just look at Twitter. Just search the deep end until you find someone that fits your need. There's a lot of people out there, so I think you can probably do it as long as you put in the time to find them, I think.
I do wonder too, like there are people who have more of a finger on the pulse, and finding them and asking them like, hey, do you have any artists or something that you recommend for XYZ thing, I think is helpful. I've did that recently for some music asset that I wanted to commission. I got recommendations for people for some of that stuff. And that helped for sure, because all the really well-known community figures are Omega booked. And so if I don't want to wait, then that's an option, which is nice.
Yeah, for sure.
The other aspect in terms of price saving, you touched on this earlier too, is kind of the on the one hand, like there's a spectrum right here. Right? On the one end of the spectrum, there's like the complete bespoke, $20,000 model that you can get commissioned from the best in the business.
The 144 hertz movement, the 60 FPS.
Yeah, fully kitted with, V-Bridger and everything that would knock the socks off your grandma. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have, people who are completely self-made in terms of, they drew their own model, they did their own rigging, and made their own art assets for everything, or they used free-to-use assets. And ultimately, the quality that you can get from that is pretty high. It's basically limited by how much time you can put into it, right?
Oh, yeah, 100%. A lot of free assets nowadays are super high quality.
Yeah, I mean, the microphones that we're using are free-to-use assets, and they look really nice, yeah. So, in terms of making, having to trade up one thing for another, there's not really much of a trade-off, actually. You can get pretty great stuff for cheap out there. There's a bunch of people who make, long Twitter threads where they link to all sorts of free-to-use assets. There's great guides and stuff out there for, how to make a model in Photoshop, what type of considerations you need for that, or whatever art program you use. And then once you have it, how to cut it and how to rig it. And so really, if you wanted to, you can spend nothing and get something that you'll probably be pretty happy with. So it really is very interesting how wide that scale is, I guess. And it does kind of feel like there's advantages to, if you can afford it, to, really buy something that is best in class, but I don't think it's necessary. And I think that the days in which doing that, and that would let you make enough of a splash to like kind of ride the wave for a bit, are kind of over. If you look back in the end of 2020 and early 2021, at least in the North American indie space, there were a lot of people getting, new models and getting them rigged and everything by, some of these best in class creators. And that alone, like just the hype and excitement of, oh shit, a new model from X person or a new rig from Y people was kind of a huge boost. But I think the market's a little more saturated now, and like the level of quality coming out of everyone is so high that it's maybe not as worth it even. And like you might even be better off not spending all that money, because the boost that you would get from that isn't as much as it was relative to the size of the scene. The scene's just grown so much larger since then that if you got the same like straight numbers of eyes on your tweet or whatever, it's just not as much of a proportional impact, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Nowadays, if you get a model, like a super good model, just for like the extra exposure, it's definitely not worth much anymore.
Yeah. I think really what it is like a personal satisfaction thing. Like how much you, the person, really want that thing. So personal example, the emotes that I just got commissioned are from someone who I knew from minute one, this is the person I want to do my emotes. And so I was comfortable with waiting for it and paying a lot for it because her emotes are very high quality. And so could I have gotten very good emotes from someone else for less? Absolutely. But this is something that I was able to, do the mental calculus and be like, yeah, this is what I want. I can afford it. It's fine. So I think that's kind of how you have to approach it. It's very easy to blow your budget clean out of the water if you don't stop and, really think about it when you're looking at all this stuff. Because there's a lot of things to spend money on as a VTuber. There's just so much.
Yeah, way too much.
You have all these art assets. There's like tons of hardware too. People are like, what mic should I buy? Should I get a Go XLR? Should I get, a Stream Deck? Do I need a better PC? Do I need, 8 billion monitors? Do I need, how many skebs should I be commissioning?
And consoles.
Yeah, consoles, capture card, everything under the sun. And it's like, you slow down there. Just you can just get a laptop, and like you said, get a laptop, a microphone. You have a phone probably, and that's all you need to start.
Yeah, you don't need much to start. You can spend a lot, but you can produce this almost the same quality if you do things right. I think
you're right. I think ultimately, if all you have going for you is like high quality assets and everything, people might check you out, but EOD, you need to be entertaining. That's the whole point, is to be entertaining.
Yeah. All it matters is your content, honestly.
Absolutely. That's what it definitely comes back to, is the content.
It's all about the content, man. I mean, in the long run, if you look at a lot of like popular VTubers, all their content is like super, super solid, if they're like pretty popular, they're probably super entertaining. So
yeah,
I think if people wanna grow and they think, better expensive assets equals good content, they probably just waste money in the end,
Yeah, completely miss the point.
Yeah, they 100% missed the point. There's like a big misconception where like the more you spend, the better quality your content will be, which I disagree, because like a lot of I think the quality of the content depends on like your personality a lot, your persona being a VTuber.
Yeah.
So like a lot of people say, oh, being a VTuber is expensive. There's like a margin of people who thinks that having a better model equals better content, 100%, which is kind of
Well, but all the best VTubers, they have the good models. But what about that?
Yeah, all the best. What about that? What you gotta say about that? I mean, you know, having a better model, you know, it's like, it's a pretty model of Iron Mouse. I mean, if Iron Mouse had like a plastic, you know, 2D picture of like a moving, you know, like a moving picture with just a like a super scuffed moving mouth, I think Iron Mouse would still succeed. Because at the end of the day, her content is super good from her personality, not from the model itself, you know?
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. And also, it's easy to like look at, you know, the big creator who has turned it into their career and as such has enough of a revenue stream that they can continue to invest back into their content and into like their model or whatever. It's easy to see that and not realize that they have the good model now because they were successful enough to get to the point where they could afford to buy the good model, right? You can maybe start with one good model, but unless you're like the son or daughter of like an oil baron, eventually you're going to run out of money if you're not making content that's driving engagement, that's, you know, getting advertising revenue or whatever. Because yeah, if you're not entertaining, people aren't going to be able to, you're not going to be able to get the funding you need to continue to improve the quality of your assets and everything, unless you're doing it for fun and you have a 9-to-5 day job and you're not really looking to grow and you just want to dump money into having a pretty model, which is totally fine, I guess. But
oh yeah, 100%.
It's definitely not how most people are going to get to having, you know, the really nice quality of everything. So definitely important to contextualize that, yeah, you don't need it. And if you are genuinely entertaining and producing good content, the success will come so long as you're marketing yourself properly, and then you'll be able to afford whatever you want.
Yeah. Basically, you shouldn't put like the cost, like the quality of your content in the costing, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's easy to conflate the two for some of the stuff, for some of the reasons that we've said, but ultimately, yeah, it's like a completely separate thing. They're not linked.
They're not the same.
No.
They are similar, but they're not the same.
Yeah, and it can be tough to hear that, honestly, as someone who's like just starting out and you don't know, you don't have a viewership or anything, and all you can really do is kind of throw money into the pit and hope it works, right? So it is tough, and it does feel like maybe if I could afford to shell out for, you know, better quality of XYZ thing, that would help, but no. And my experience as a lurker for a while now, it doesn't feel like anyone has found success like that. Everyone who is successful because they've earned it.
Anyone who's successful off of that the quality of their model, no hate or like no target towards them necessarily, they probably will fall off.
Yeah.
Yeah, they probably will fall off like at the end of the day. Unless they're, you know, they become entertaining, you know.
Yeah, and I mean that can definitely happen.
Drive.
Getting a lot of eyes early on can be the type of thing you need to find the creative spark to start producing good content. But yeah, I mean that doesn't seem like a reliable way of doing it. I think
that is very risky.
Yeah, having the content first, probably the safest way to do it.
All right. So, what do you think about PNG tubers? Are they like VTubers? What do you think?
Well, as a PNG tuber, obviously they are. But yeah, I mean, jokes aside, I think yes. My personal definition of VTuber is pretty loose with it. I think hybrid VTubers are legitimate VTubers. I think PNG tubers are legitimate VTubers. I think ultimately, as long as you're producing content of some style and you have an avatar that you use at least part of the time and you want to append the label to yourself, then it kind of counts. But it's tough because then the line of like what is content is the question, and that one's a little finicky because like if you just tweet, are tweets content? Maybe.
Honestly, I think they are, because like Twitter is content.
I mean, yeah, like people consume Twitter, they consume it for the content on Twitter. So one thing that you can think about is like, is it possible to make revenue off of it? I don't know that for my personal definition that matters, but I know at least it is possible to be an influencer and earn a living off of that. So sure, why not? Why not become like a big Twitter VTuber and then use that to get sponsorships or whatever, and then bada bing bada boom, now you have revenue that you're earning off of it. And so what do you think?
From like, I heard a lot of things from a lot of people. Personally, I think I'm on the neutral spectrum on this topic, because at one side, I kinda am an ex PNG VTuber, but I never really called myself a VTuber because I don't want to anger a lot of VTubers don't think PNG tubers are VTubers, from the fact that PNG tubers don't have rigging. You don't actually move around, and there's like half the cost, and like basically a lot of VTubers think that you don't put in as much effort, as much costing. But on the other end of the spectrum, there's a lot of VTubers who use PNGs when the games take too much out of their PC. Sometimes it gets like their PC gets overloaded from their model, because models
True.
take a lot of CPU, and
Yeah,
do they take a lot of graphics card like power?
I think it probably depends on your setup and which piece of hardware you're using to run the software. I actually haven't ever opened up any of those software programs yet, so I don't actually know off of personal experience, but I imagine you could do it through your graphics card or your CPU.
But yeah, a lot of VTubers have like poopy PCs. They want to play like high-end games, and what they do is basically just slap a PNG on and say that's me instead.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still VTubers. So like, it's there's two ends of the spectrum, and I'm in the middle, because I agree with both points, because like normal VTubers, not like PNG tubers, they spend a justifiable amount on their rigging, right? And I feel like the effort into like rigging and stuff, instead of being just a PNG, it should add into becoming a VTuber in a way. But at the same time, being a PNG itself, you could be a VTuber, right?
Yeah.
Like one side you don't really need rigging, like we talked about like just now, like costing, you don't really need it to be a VTuber. So like I spoke to one of the company VTubers some time ago. They basically said the same thing about like a lot of people spend a lot of like money on rigging. I think that should be like justifiable to be like a VTuber. They spend more, therefore like what they say is PNG tubers aren't worthy enough to be VTubers. Is what they said.
Okay, so it's like there's a little bit of elitism there then.
Yeah, 100%. Personally, I also think like a lot of elitism is like a lot of high horsing. Is that a word? High
Yeah,
horsing?
it is now. It is now.
It is now. It's in my vocabulary.
Yeah.
There's a lot of high horsing in those like VTubers mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
It's somewhat justifiable and somewhat not, you know. I understand why they think like that, but I don't necessarily agree. Right?
Yeah,
It's like a sketchy, you know, line to tread on.
Yeah, I mean, I can see a legitimate argument there because avatar streaming, like where you have a picture and that's just who you like representing your persona online, streaming under an avatar has existed since like forever. So if PNG tubing is VTubing, is that VTubing? And it's like at some
Yeah, it's very
point,
confusing.
like if you blur the lines too much, then you get the meme of like the annoying orange was the first VTuber, right? So
Oh yeah.
so like clearly there's something fundamentally different. It kind of goes back to the first topic, right, where there's these things that are kind of the trappings of a VTuber. You don't need the anime aesthetic, but if you have the anime aesthetic, you're probably a VTuber. You don't need to have rigging, maybe, but if you have rigging, then you're probably a VTuber. If you, I don't know, do short form content or you stream versus if you're just on Twitter, then you're probably a VTuber. So it's like a bunch of markers or different qualities that VTubers probably have. And I think if you have enough of them, then yeah, you're a VTuber. So long as you want to call yourself a VTuber. It's definitely flexible, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think it's also like slightly because of the cultural difference. I think if you're like a JP PNG tuber, they'll probably call you a PNG tuber instead of VTuber. Whereas EN community wise, they are probably more open.
That's a good point. It definitely a topic for a completely future episode, but there's definitely a culture gap for sure. And not even just between like JP and the rest of the world, but also North American VTubers and European VTubers or Australian VTubers or South American VTubers or, you know, Southeast Asia, yada, 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 yada. And so probably then the experience that whoever is talking about this question has had in like the communities that they've been a viewer or a VTuber probably would shape the answer that you have to that question. I think that might be why I'm maybe more flexible on the definition. As someone with more experience, most of my experience is like in the EN indie scene. So
yeah, I think you're right because I'm more or less from the JP side of the community.
Mm-hmm.
So like I honestly kind of understand the elitism that you pointed out.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was in the middle, you know, as if some people would like completely disagree with what I said, but from where I come from, I mean, there's like a very solid barrier in the JP scene for, you know, what is a VTuber compared to like the EN, I think.
Interesting. Do you one like kind of tangential question then is, do you have to be on YouTube to be a VTuber? Right, does Twitch count?
Hell no, dude.
Okay, so
100% Twitch counts.
Do they have like, as I don't know, maybe as I wonder if that's like a culture gap thing too, but is that something that's less of a, obviously if you're on Twitch you're still a VTuber. I wonder if like that perception is different in Japan, because a lot of the Japanese VTubers, even the small ones that I'm familiar with, like the really, really tiny ones, are on YouTube compared to Twitch.
In the old times, if you stream on Twitch, maybe. But nowadays, like, a lot of VTubers use like tweetcasting, Twitch.
True.
Like, for example, like Niji Sanji Kanae, he's streaming Valorant on Twitch as well.
Yeah.
You can stream wherever you want nowadays. I don't think there's like a necessarily need to, you must be on YouTube, that kind of thing. I think it's more free nowadays. I think the old days it's because of, the majority of VTuber fans, listeners are watching YouTube. That's why a lot of even small VTubers from JP decide to go to YouTube instead of Twitch, because Twitch is relatively smaller at the time in the JP scene. So that might be why.
Yeah, I wonder too if part of the perception shift is, like, as you said, like the really big VTubers, like the Hololives, the Hololivers and the Niji-Sanji livers, branching out and using multiple platforms. I wonder if that has helped, at least on that front. Although I can't imagine anyone was seriously being like, oh, if you're streaming on Twitch, even in like the JP side, I can't imagine there were very many people who were seriously that purist about it. I think it's just a funny meme that people bring up.
Yeah, probably.
Mm-hmm. So I do wonder then if the PNG, for like Ari, the PNG tuber question, if like you were to instance see some of those really big streamers use a PNG a lot of the time, I wonder if that would help with shake the community perception. Like if tomorrow everyone in Niji-Sanji EN just decided that, yeah, I'm going to just use a PNG for like a month or something, I wonder if the perception would shift. My gut feeling is yes, but I don't know. It's also kind of an outlandish scenario to imagine, so
I think it's a yes though, because like Hololive and Niji-Sanji are like the forefront runners of like the community. They really set an example of like, the big example of being like VTubers. Even though like just like we said, like PNG tubers are VTubers, I think even in JP, right, a lot of like big VTubers use PNG here and there. So like the mindset already shifted a bit, I think. So yeah, I think it's a yes from like the question. Interesting. They 100% can influence like the mindset of like the community, because like they're the strong backbone of the community.
Yeah, I mean, if you consider the question of like what is a VTuber, right? Even more fundamentally than our PNG tubers, VTubers, we already talked about how some of the things that the big corpos do just become convention for no reason other than, oh yeah, Hololive did it, so I'll do it. Things like calling you, like when an indie retires, they graduate. But you're not graduating from anything. You're an independent VTuber.
Yeah.
So we only call it a graduation because Hololive calls it a graduation, because the idol scene calls it a graduation, because that one idol group that was school themed, when their member retired, they graduated. So it's all kind of just made up, but if enough people believe in it, I guess it's real. So
yeah, it honestly depends on what the community wants to think.
Yeah.
It all depends on that.
If you don't agree with me and you're in the community, you're just wrong. So maybe change your opinion. So there we go. I think that is all that I have to say for the rest of on this topic. If you don't agree with me that PNG tubers are VTubers, you're wrong. Sorry. Cope L
plus ratio.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're wrong. But yeah. If you guys have like any input on the topics we talk about today, you guys can comment on the comment section.
I'm really interested to see what the thoughts are on some of this stuff. I know these are like both topics that are perpetual discussion points, and like a lot of it is just kind of rehashing the same ground that got tread upon. But hopefully, I think we talked about some stuff that I don't see talked about very often, and hopefully, the comment section will have other things that are interesting. So yeah, please let me know if you think that I'm wrong, because you're not right. I'm never wrong.
Yeah. As a wise man once said, My bad, your fault.
I'm definitely stealing that one. Yeah, no, my go-to is I'm never wrong, I never apologize. I said that one. I'm the wise man.
Easy crap. But I hope like this podcast reaches to like the people who's just getting into VTubing or like VTubers in general.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, getting into the community is kind of like you walking through a maze a bit when you're starting out. Like, what is what? And, what is this whole life thing?
Yeah.
Why is there a white fox on my YouTube feed every day?
Oh, no. It's over. But yeah, over. I agree that there's a lot of jargon, a lot of convention for the sake of convention, a lot of things that just are because they are. And so, yeah, it can definitely be confusing if you're new to the idea of VTubers and you want to like learn, or if you want to hop into it yourself, it can be confusing. Why are things called the things they are or whatever? So definitely, yeah, hopefully this helped a little bit. And if not, please reach out to me. I love talking about this shit. I will never shut up if you ask me a question about it.
That's all for today. Thank you for coming to the podcast. If you want to support us, you can like and subscribe, hit the bell button. If you're from Spotify, you can hit the follow button. And if you want to follow extra news from us, you can follow our Twitter in the description. We also have our own socials, which is also in the description.
Thanks, everyone. Catch you all next time.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.